It really feels like the world is spinning faster every day, doesn't it? Global events, information just flooding in. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. How do you even begin to keep up, let alone understand what it all means?
It's a huge challenge, absolutely. And that feeling of being overwhelmed,
Yeah.
that's precisely why we're here.
Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive. Think of us as your personalized filter. We take all these diverse sources, cutting-edge science, geopolitical shifts, economic news, humanitarian stories, and we try to pull out the really important stuff.
Nuggets of knowledge. Yeah.
Exactly. The mission is simple, really.
Okay.
Turn that information overload into, clear understanding. We want to arm you with the key facts, maybe some surprising insights, and hopefully keep it engaging, maybe even a little bit fun along the way.
Make sense of the chaos.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
And today, wow, we're really covering the map. We're going deep into some genuinely groundbreaking science stuff that makes you question reality itself.
Then there's the whole tech landscape, AI everywhere, major geopolitical tremors shaking things up, big economic shifts, and those crucial humanitarian stories that, honestly, we just can't ignore.
And we'll guide you through it. We'll unpack the developments, look at different angles, try to connect the dots for you. The aim is that you walk away not just, informed, but feeling genuinely more enlightened, more ready to engage with all this complexity.
All right, then. Ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay, Section 1. The frontiers of knowledge. Science, space, and AI's edge. Let's start right at the deep end, I guess. This search for a hidden layer of reality. I thought physics had things pretty much figured out with the Standard Model.
Well, that's what's so fascinating. The Standard Model of physics has been incredibly successful describing the fundamental particles and forces. And finding the Higgs boson about a decade ago, that was seen as this huge confirmation, the final piece of that puzzle.
Right, the God particle and all that.
Exactly. But there was this expectation, this hope, really, among physicists, that finding the Higgs would unlock the door to all sorts of new physics beyond the Standard Model, maybe new particles, new forces, maybe even extra dimensions, things that the Standard Model doesn't explain, like dark matter or dark energy.
So they found the key, turned the lock, opened the door, and nothing new jumped out. Kind of an anticlimax.
Sort of, yeah. Instead of this predicted explosion of discoveries, things have been, stubbornly standard. We haven't found those expected new particles at the energy levels we've been able to probe with things like the Large Hadron Collider.
Huh.
And this absence, this lack of expected new physics, has led scientists down this really profound path. They're now seriously exploring the possibility that there might be an entire hidden layer of reality lurking just beyond or maybe below our current understanding.
A hidden layer, like the universe has a secret menu we didn't know about.
That's one way to put it. It challenges the basic assumption that our current theories, even the Standard Model, give us the complete picture. Researchers are now hunting for tiny anomalies, subtle cracks in the Standard Model, anything that might hint at this deeper, unseen complexity.
So it's less about finding flashy new things and more about looking for imperfections in the old picture.
Precisely. It's a moment of real scientific humility, acknowledging that what we call the Standard Model might just be one chapter, maybe even just a page in a much bigger book. Reality could be far stranger, far vaster than we currently grasp.
Okay, my mind is slightly blown already. But say they find evidence for this hidden layer. What does that mean for, us, beyond just rewriting textbooks?
Oh, the implications would be absolutely revolutionary. Discovering something like that could fundamentally change our understanding of how the universe works at its most basic level. It could open up entirely new avenues for experiments, maybe lead to technologies we can't even imagine right now. It really forces us to question how complete our scientific picture is.
Right. It's a reminder that there's always more to learn. Okay, from the fundamentally vast to the fundamentally small and slightly weird, let's talk about growing miniature human brains in the lab. Mini brains. It sounds unsettling.
It does sound a bit sci-fi, doesn't it? But it's a very real and rapidly advancing field. Researchers are using stem cells, culturing them in petri dishes, and coaxing them to self-organize into structures that resemble early-stage human brain development. They call them brain organoids.
Brain organoids. Okay, that sounds a bit more scientific than mini brains. But how complex are we talking here? Are they just lumps of cells, or...?
They're becoming surprisingly complex. They develop different types of brain cells, form layers, and can even show spontaneous neural activity patterns of electrical firing, similar to what you see in developing fetal brains.
Whoa. Okay, spontaneous neural activity. That definitely bumps up the unsettling factor. Are we anywhere near, consciousness in a dish?
And that is the million-dollar question. It sparked a massive ethical and scientific discussion. Could consciousness, even a rudimentary form, emerge in these organoids as they get more complex? Scientists themselves are raising these concerns.
So the people doing the research are worried about where it might lead.
Yeah, very much so. As these organoids become more sophisticated, could they develop some form of intelligence, sentience? It really starts to blur the lines between artificial intelligence, which we talk about a lot, and actual biological consciousness created in a lab.
It's like we're running into these fundamental questions from completely different directions. Physics, AI, now biology.
Exactly. On the one hand, this research holds immense promise for understanding brain development, neurological diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, maybe testing drugs. The potential benefits are huge.
But the other hand is pretty heavy.
Extremely heavy. It underscores the absolute need for responsible research practices, strong ethical guidelines. We're pushing into territory where we need to be very careful, very thoughtful about what we're creating and what responsibilities come with that. What does it mean if we create something that might feel or perceive or suffer?
Yeah, those are questions without easy answers. It forces us to think about what life and consciousness even mean. Okay, let's shift our focus outwards now, to space. First up, some interesting developments related to the origins of life. The panspermia theory.
Right, the idea that life on Earth might not have started here but might have originated elsewhere in space and been delivered here, perhaps by asteroids or comets.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating, though still debated concept.
And there's new evidence related to this.
There are some intriguing findings, yeah. Astronomers studying the protostar V83 Orionis, that's a very young star still forming, have detected complex organic molecules in the disk of gas and dust surrounding it.
Complex organic molecules like what?
Things strikingly similar to the building blocks of DNA and proteins found right here on Earth. Finding these kinds of molecules, the precursors to life as we know it, around a young star system, it definitely adds weight to the idea that these essential ingredients for life are common in the universe and could potentially travel between star systems.
So the ingredients for life's recipe might be scattered all over the cosmos.
That's the implication. It challenges the traditional view that life arose solely from conditions on early Earth and suggests, maybe we have an extraterrestrial heritage in a way.
Okay, while we're out there looking at stars,
Yeah.
some scientists are also looking closer to home, specifically at the moon. What happens if an asteroid hits it? Is that something we need to worry about?
Well, it's something astronomers are actively studying. Not necessarily out of immediate worry, but more to understand the dynamics of our celestial neighborhood. They're running simulations, analyzing lunar geology, trying to model the potential consequences of a significant impact on the moon.
What kind of consequences? Like, would it knock the moon out of orbit? Send debris raining down on Earth?
Major orbital changes are unlikely unless it was absolutely colossal impact. But they're studying things like how much debris would be ejected, where it might go, how it could affect the lunar surface, and whether any significant amount could potentially reach Earth. It's part of understanding the hazards and the history of impacts in the Earth-Moon system.
Got it. So less impending doom, more understanding the system. Fair enough. And the Hubble Space Telescope is still delivering the goods, I see, spying on galaxies and supernovae.
Oh, absolutely. Hubble is still the workhorse. It recently captured some stunning images and data from the galaxy NGC 3D85b. It's a beautiful swirling spiral galaxy on the outskirts of the Hydra-Thing cluster.
What was special about this observation?
Within that galaxy, Hubble observed a specific type of supernova called SN 2023 Octocolator. It's a Type Ia supernova.
Type Ia. Remind me why those are important.
They're incredibly important because they act as standard candles in astronomy. Type Ia supernovae always explode, with roughly the same intrinsic brightness. So, by measuring how bright they appear to us, astronomers can calculate how far away they are with remarkable precision.
Right. Like knowing the wattage of a light bulb helps you figure out how far away it is based on how dim it looks.
Exactly. And these observations of SN 2023 Octocolator are part of a much larger program. Scientists are targeting 100 Type Ia supernovae using Hubble. The goal is to build a really precise map of cosmic distances, which helps us refine our measurements of how fast the universe is expanding and understand fundamental cosmology, things like the nature of dark energy.
So each one is like adding another precise measurement to our map of the cosmos. Cool. Okay, now for something completely different, but still science. Ozzy Osbourne's DNA. Why are scientists studying the Prince of Darkness? I mean, besides the obvious question of how he's still going.
Chuckles. Well, that's kind of the point, actually. His Legendary survival skills, despite decades of notorious hard living, made scientists genuinely curious. Back in 2010, a company called Gnome Inc. did a whole genome sequencing on him.
They sequenced Ozzy's entire genetic code. What did they find? The gene for biting heads off bats.
Not quite, but they did find some interesting genetic predispositions. Certain variants linked to how his body processes alcohol and drugs, potentially explaining, on a genetic level, some of his ability to withstand substances that might have been fatal for others. They also found some unusual variants related to neurotransmitters and even uncovered Neanderthal lineage in his DNA.
Neanderthal lineage, so he really is a genetic mutant, like the report said.
Well, genetic mutant is maybe a bit sensational, but the analysis did reveal uncommon characteristics, yeah. More broadly, though, studying unique cases like Ozzy's can offer real insights into how specific genetic variants influence individual behavior, health, and resilience. It moves beyond just one rock star and helps us understand human biology on a wider scale.
Okay, that actually makes sense. It's not just about Ozzy. It's about understanding the extremes of human biology. Moving back to space now, but with a geopolitical lens, NASA's Artemis Accords Senegal just signed on.
That's right. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, welcomed Senegal as the 56th nation to sign the Artemis Accords.
So what exactly are these accords? Is it like a rule book for going to the moon?
Essentially, yes. It's an international agreement outlining principles for cooperation and responsible behavior in space exploration, specifically focused on the moon, Mars, and beyond. It's non-binding, but signatories agree to follow certain guidelines.
Like what kind of guidelines?
Things like peaceful purposes only, transparency in activities, commitment to release scientific data, providing emergency assistance to astronauts from any nation, preserving outer space heritage like the Apollo landing sites, and coordinating activities to avoid harmful interference.
Sounds pretty sensible. And Senegal joining is significant. Why?
It's significant because it shows the broadening international coalition involved in space exploration beyond the traditional space powers. Senegal's signing, which followed a meeting between President Trump and Senegalese President Faye, also highlights a multilateral approach and is seen as deepening U.S.-Africa engagement in this high-tech field. It emphasizes that space is becoming a domain for global cooperation, at least in principle.
In principle, right. Because space is also getting complicated geopolitically, like this upcoming SpaceX mission to the International Space Station, ISS.
Yes, NASA is preparing for its SpaceX Crew 11 mission. Liftoff is scheduled for July 31st from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, carrying astronauts to the ISS.
And the crew is pretty international, isn't it, despite tensions on Earth?
Very international. You've got NASA astronauts Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, Kimiya Yui from JXA, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and Oleg Platonov, a cosmonaut from Roscosmos, the Russian State Space Corporation.
So, a Russian cosmonaut flying on a U.S. commercial spacecraft alongside American and Japanese astronauts.
It's exactly. This is NASA's 11th crew rotation mission under the Commercial Crew Program. It really underscores the continued international collaboration on the ISS, which has somehow managed to persist as an outpost of cooperation, even amidst really complex and often tense geopolitical situations down here on Earth. It highlights the value placed on maintaining safe, reliable access to the station.
It's kind of amazing that cooperation continues up there, but then you have other space activities that seem to point in a different direction, like Iran launching a satellite with Russia's help.
That's the contrast, isn't it? Recently, a Russian Soyuz rocket launched an Iranian communication satellite called Nahid-2 from the Vostochny Cosmodrome in Russia's Far East. This isn't the first time. It signifies an ongoing joint space initiative between Russia and Iran.
Nahid-2, designed by Iranian engineers, you said?
Yes, the 110-kilogram satellite was reportedly designed and built in Iran. But as you can imagine, this collaboration raises red flags in the West.
Why specifically? What are the concerns?
Western governments worry that Iran's space program, even if presented as purely civilian or scientific, could be used to advance its ballistic missile technology. The technologies involved in launching satellites and launching long-range missiles have significant overlaps.
The dual-use concern.
Precisely. And adding another layer of complexity, this launch happened right when Iran was involved in important nuclear talks with European powers and Turkey. So the timing is seen by some as strategically significant, highlighting Iran's space ambitions, its alignment with Russia, and potentially using its space program as leverage or a signal in other geopolitical arenas.
So space is definitely not just about science and exploration anymore. It's a theater for geopolitical maneuvering, too. Okay, let's bring it back down to Earth, technologically speaking. Artificial intelligence. Its dual nature seems more apparent every day, from helping us shop to, well, potentially changing warfare. First, AI companions. The debate is threat to love or evolution of connection.
It's a really potent debate, and it's happening right now. At a recent discussion, one side framed AI companions as an exciting new form of connection, suggesting they could offer companionship, reduce loneliness, maybe even help people practice social skills.
An exciting new form of connection, or a way to avoid the messiness of actual human relationships.
That's the other side of the coin. Critics worry that relying on AI companions could weaken our ability to form deep, empathetic bonds with other humans. Could it make us less tolerant of imperfection, less willing to put in the work that real relationships require? Could it ultimately be a threat to human love itself?
As AI gets more sophisticated, more human-like in conversation, these questions aren't just philosophical anymore, are they?
Not at all. They hit right at the core of our understanding of relationships, emotional well-being, societal norms. What does intimacy mean if one party is an algorithm? Can an AI truly care? Or does it just simulate caring really well? These are fundamental questions about the future of human connection in an increasingly AI-integrated world.
Yeah, deep stuff. Meanwhile, AI is also becoming very practical, very integrated into daily life. Like at Walmart, they're using AI super agents.
They are. Walmart is rolling out 4 new AI systems, which they're calling super agents, powered by something called agentic AI. The goal is to enhance the shopping experience, streamline operations, and compete more effectively, especially with rivals like Amazon.
The super agents. Okay, what can they do? Do they wear little capes?
Chuckles? Probably not.
Eh.
But they act as primary interfaces for AI interactions. For example, there's one called Sparky that can chat with shoppers, give product suggestions, even help plan themed parties using computer vision to understand context. Another one, Marty, assists sellers and advertisers on Walmart's platform with managing orders or creating ad campaigns.
So it's about making things easier for customers, employees, and suppliers using AI.
Exactly. It's a very clear example of AI being deployed for practical business reasons, attracting customers, improving efficiency, managing complex logistics. It shows how quickly AI is moving from research labs into tangible applications in major industries like retail.
And Apple's getting in on the AI game too, presumably. What's happening with iOS 26?
Well, Apple just released the public beta for iOS 26. This gives regular users an early look at new features and improvements. It's being touted as the biggest iPhone software redesign since way back in 2013. Releasing the beta allows Apple to get feedback from a wider audience before the official launch, helping to iron out bugs.
Any major changes besides the look?
One significant change is happening in the App Store. Apple is expanding its age rating system. They're getting rid of the old 12 plus and 17 plus ratings and introducing 13 plus Cs, 16 plus Cs, and 18 plus SIGs. App developers will have to answer new questions to classify potentially sensitive content more accurately.
So more granular age ratings. Why the change?
The aim seems to be providing more accurate, age-appropriate content recommendations and enhancing user safety, especially for younger users. It reflects Apple's ongoing focus on curating its ecosystem and managing content responsibly within its walled garden.
Okay, and X, formerly Twitter, is also trying something new with its community notes system, using it to find the best posts.
Yeah, this is an interesting experiment. X is piloting a feature that uses its existing community notes system, which is primarily known for adding context or fact checks to potentially misleading posts to actually identify and highlight what the community deems the best or highest quality posts on the platform.
So instead of just flagging bad stuff, it's trying to surface good stuff using crowdsourcing.
That seems to be the idea. It's leveraging that same community-driven mechanism, but flipping it from a corrective function to a curatorial one. How exactly they define best and how well it works remains to be seen, but it could significantly change how content gets surfaced and discovered on X, putting more emphasis on community consensus about quality and popularity.
Interesting. Lots of changes in the tech space. Now, onto something maybe less successful, at least for now. Tesla's humanoid robots. I heard they're behind schedule.
Reports suggest they are, yeah. Tesla had this really ambitious target of manufacturing 5,000 Optimus humanoid robots this year. But according to recent reports, they're falling significantly behind that goal. Apparently, only a few hundred have actually been produced so far.
5,000 down to a few hundred. That's quite a gap.
It is. It really raises questions about Tesla's ability to meet these aggressive manufacturing timelines, especially for something as complex as a humanoid robot. It highlights the immense challenges involved in not just designing these things, but actually scaling up production. Robotics is hard. especially humanoid robotics at scale.
And at the same time, they're launching their robotaxi service. Isn't that also a bit
Yeah.
ambitious?
They are launching it, yes, but in a very limited way. An early version of the robotaxi service is rolling out in San Francisco, California this weekend, following an initial, also limited launch last month in Austin, Texas. So it's happening, but it's very much in the early stages, geographically restricted. It underscores Tesla's dual focus on autonomous technology, robots, and self-driving cars, but also the difficulty of bringing these futuristic visions to mass market reality quickly.
Right. Big promises, slow rollout. Okay, now for something that sounds genuinely dystopian, Germany investing in spy cockroaches. Is this real life?
It appears to be. As part of a significant military expansion and investment drive, Germany is accelerating funding for defense tech startups. And yes, that reportedly includes exploring futuristic warfare technologies like tiny surveillance robots disguised as or inspired by insects like cockroaches, alongside more conventional AI-powered robots.
Spy cockroaches, why? I mean, what's the strategic thinking there?
The idea, presumably, is stealthy reconnaissance in complex environments where traditional drones might be too large or easily detected. It's part of a broader push under Chancellor Friedrich Merz to modernize the German military and increase spending significantly, aiming for $153 billion, that's about $165 billion US dollars, by 2029, and hitting 3.5% of GDP for defense. This is largely framed as a response to a perceived threat from Russia.
The AI-powered spy cockroaches, that just screams ethical nightmare, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Surveillance, autonomy, and warfare.
Absolutely. This move to reinvent warfare, as some are calling it, with these advanced and unconventional technologies raises huge ethical questions. Where do you draw the line on autonomous surveillance? What happens if these things are weaponized? It also highlights Germany's position as the second largest arms supplier to Ukraine, which feeds into concerns about potential escalation with Russia. This is a stark example of how AI and robotics are pushing the boundaries of military technology, often faster than ethical frameworks can keep up.
And the reliance on advanced tech in conflict zones has real vulnerabilities, as we saw with the Starlink outage affecting Ukrainian soldiers.
That was a significant incident, yeah. Ukrainian forces, who rely heavily on Elon Musk's Starlink satellite internet service for critical communications, command and control, and even drone operations, faced major difficulties during a global outage of the service. Reportedly, over 40,000 Starlink terminals used by Ukraine were affected.
How long did the outage last? Was it resolved quickly?
It lasted about 2.5 hours. Elon Musk did apologize publicly quite promptly, and reports indicate that connectivity was fully restored relatively quickly across the front lines.
But still, 2.5 hours without critical comms in a war zone? That's a long time.
It's incredibly disruptive. The incident really underscores how dependent modern military operations have become on these advanced, often commercial communication systems. And it highlights their potential vulnerabilities, whether technical glitches, deliberate jamming, or cyber attacks, especially in active conflict zones. It shows the double-edged sword of relying on this kind of cutting-edge tech.
Definitely. Okay, one more tech-related piece before we move on. The high cost of U.S.-made microchips from TSMC's Arizona plant.
Right. This ties back to the push for supply chain resilience and domestic manufacturing. Tech giant AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, is reportedly paying a premium, potentially up to 20% higher, for computer chips made by TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, at their new facility in Arizona, USA, compared to the identical chips made in Taiwan.
20% more. Why would they agree to that?
It's seen as a strategic cost, an investment in supply chain security. The pandemic and geopolitical tensions really highlighted the risks of relying too heavily on just one region, particularly Taiwan, for critical semiconductor manufacturing. So companies like AMD, encouraged by U.S. government initiatives and subsidies like the Teach a PS Act, are willing to pay more for chips made domestically, or at least in a politically safer location, to ensure a more resilient supply.
But building these plants in the U.S. isn't easy, is it?
No, the push faces real hurdles. High construction costs in the U.S., shortages of skilled labor needed to run these highly complex fabrication plants, or fabs. It's a massive undertaking.
And how does China fit into this picture?
It's all happening against the backdrop of U.S.-China great power competition. The U.S. government is actively trying to boost domestic production, partly to reduce reliance on potentially vulnerable supply chains linked to China or regions near China. Simultaneously, the U.S. has imposed export controls on high-end chips and chip-making equipment to slow China's technological advancement in areas like AI and supercomputing.
Which presumably just makes China more determined to develop its own capabilities.
Exactly. These restrictions are pushing Beijing to pour massive resources into accelerating its own domestic semiconductor industry. So you have this complex dynamic, the U.S. trying to onshore production and secure its supply chain while also trying to limit China's access to advanced tech, and China responding by doubling down on self-sufficiency. It's reshaping the entire global semiconductor landscape.
A very high-stakes game with huge economic and geopolitical implications. Okay, let's shift focus now. All right, let's dive into the global chessboard itself. Starting in the Middle East, which seems to be in constant flux, a really major move here. France deciding to formally recognize the state of Palestine.
Yes, this is a significant diplomatic step with potentially wide-ranging consequences.
Yeah.
French President Emmanuel Macron announced that France will recognize Palestine as a state, and they plan to make the formal declaration at the UN General Assembly in September.
That makes France the first major G7 country to do so, right? Setting them apart from the US, UK, Germany.
Correct. The G7, that's Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US, has generally followed the US lead in holding off recognition until a final peace settlement is reached. So France breaking ranks like this is a notable departure.
And the reactions have been predictable, maybe. Strong condemnation from the US and Israel.
Very strong. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the French decision reckless and claimed it serves Hamas propaganda. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went further, warning it rewards terrorism and could lead to the creation of another Iranian proxy state on Israel's borders.
Okay, so pushback from that side. What about elsewhere? Has anyone welcomed the move?
Oh, yes. Saudi Arabia and Spain, for instance, praised it as historic and urged other Western nations to follow France's example. Russia also chimed in, reaffirming its long-standing position, supporting a two-state solution as the only viable path.
And all this is happening while ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas are struggling, to put it mildly.
Exactly. Efforts to broker even a temporary truce are facing huge obstacles, with both sides reportedly making conflicting demands that negotiators are finding hard to bridge. So France's move comes at a moment of diplomatic stalemate and seems to highlight and perhaps even deepen the international divisions over how to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Meanwhile, the situation on the ground in Gaza sounds increasingly desperate. The humanitarian crisis, the reports are just devastating.
They are truly horrific. UN aid agencies are reporting alarming malnutrition rates, 1 in 5 children in Gaza City. The death toll attributed directly to starvation has reportedly climbed to 115. Humanitarian groups are using language like walking corpses to describe the condition of many Palestinians. It's a catastrophic situation.
And the talks aimed at getting more aid in, securing a ceasefire, they've broken down.
It appears so, at least for now. The U.S. and Israel both recalled their negotiating teams, expressing frustration with Hamas's latest proposals. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff accused Hamas of showing a lack of desire to reach a ceasefire. Former President Donald Trump echoed that, saying Hamas didn't want a deal. So diplomacy seems stalled at a critical time.
Is there still international pressure being applied?
There is pressure from various quarters. In Washington, D.C., you have rights advocates, including doctors and military veterans, publicly urging the Trump administration to end what they call unconditional support for Israel, pointing to U.S. military aid and diplomatic cover as enabling Israel's actions.
And there was that inflammatory comment from an Israeli minister.
Yes, adding fuel to the fire. Israeli Heritage Minister Amichai Eliyahu made remarks dismissing the famine concerns and talking about erasing Gaza and making it entirely Jewish. Those comments drew widespread condemnation, including sharp criticism from within Israel itself.
So even amidst all this, the calls for an end to the fighting and more aid must be getting louder.
They are, from many countries and international organizations. But the combination of stalled negotiations, the deepening humanitarian crisis, and these ongoing controversies and allegations of rights violations makes finding a path forward incredibly difficult.
And while all this is happening in Gaza, Israel is taking steps related to the West Bank, applying sovereignty over settlements.
That's correct. The Israeli Knesset, their parliament, recently passed a preliminary vote, a motion to apply Israeli sovereignty over settlements in the occupied West Bank and the Jordan Valley. It passed 71-13, with support from right-wing and center-right parties.
Is this full annexation or something else?
It's seen by many observers as a significant bureaucratic step towards annexation, or at least towards solidifying permanent Israeli control. Critics call it de facto annexation through administrative means. It's also widely interpreted as a political move by Prime Minister Netanyahu to shore up support within his right-wing coalition government, especially while dealing with the complexities of the Gaza situation.
And the international reaction? Condemnation again, I assume.
Swift condemnation, yes. Many countries and the UN reiterated support for a two-state solution and called the vote a violation of international law. However, and this is a crucial point highlighted in the reporting, these condemnations have often been described as being without impactful repercussions.
So, words, but no real consequences.
That seems to be the narrative emerging, that despite international objections, Israeli expansion in the West Bank continues, often facilitated by these kinds of legislative or administrative moves, while key Western allies maintain their overall support. It highlights a perceived gap between international rhetoric and concrete action.
Okay, let's shift focus to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the dynamics around it. Ukrainian President Zelensky apparently had to backtrack on some anti-corruption laws. That sounds complicated.
It is. Ukraine is fighting a war for survival, but it also needs to implement crucial domestic reforms, especially regarding corruption, if it wants to achieve its goal of joining the European Union. There was significant backlash, both domestically and internationally, against a recently passed law.
What was wrong with the original law?
Critics argued it weakened key anti-corruption institutions. Specifically, it placed bodies like NBU, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, and SAPO, the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, under the control of the Prosecutor General. This raised serious concerns about potential political interference and undermining their independence, which is a core requirement for EU accession.
So it looked like a step backwards on fighting corruption.
Exactly. It sparked protests and warnings from international partners. President Zelensky initially defended the law, framing it as necessary to counter Russian influence within these agencies. But, facing the pressure, he's now introduced a new draft bill aimed at restoring the procedural powers and independence of NBU and SAPO.
He even proposed lie detector tests.
Yes, he mentioned potentially requiring mandatory polygraph tests for employees of these agencies to, in his words, keep out alleged Russian interference. It really highlights the incredibly difficult balancing act Ukraine faces, fighting external aggression while simultaneously undertaking deep internal reforms and navigating intense geopolitical pressures.
And speaking of geopolitical pressures, Germany seems to be taking a more assertive stance towards Russia, mentioning long-range missile capabilities for Ukraine.
There seems to be a shift, yes. German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul stated that Ukraine will soon have the capability to strike targets inside Russia, potentially hinting at the future delivery of Taurus long-range missiles. This marks a more aggressive tone compared to the previous Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, who had blocked sending Taurus missiles due to fears of escalation. The current leadership under Friedrich Merz appears more hawkish.
And this ties back to Germany's increased military spending we discussed earlier.
Precisely. The plans to boost the military budget significantly, invest in futuristic tech like those spy cockroaches, and allocate 3.5% of GDP to defense are all part of this more robust defense posture, explicitly citing the perceived threat from Russia.
Meanwhile, Russia is accusing the UK of plotting against U.S.-Russia relations.
Yes. Nikolai Patrushev, a top security aide to Russian President Putin, accused the United Kingdom of planning a false flag operation designed to sabotage U.S.-Russia relations and undermine former President Trump's efforts to resolve the Ukraine conflict. He claimed London would even betray Washington if necessary. Russian officials consistently argue that Western support for Ukraine is the main obstacle to peace talks.
So escalating rhetoric on both sides, and the actual fighting continues, including drone strikes. A Ukrainian drone hit a passenger train in Russia.
Reportedly, yes. A Ukrainian drone struck a passenger train in Timashevsk, a town in southern Russia, injuring 2 people and causing damage. This follows other alleged Ukrainian drone attacks, like one in Sochi, and aligns with Moscow's claims that Ukraine is sabotaging Russian railways. These attacks contribute to rising tensions.
And Ukraine is looking to buy more drones.
President Zelensky mentioned a potential deal with the U.S. for combat drones, possibly worth $10 to $30 billion. He emphasized, however, that Ukraine needs Western funding not just for weapons but also to cover budget shortfalls, including paying the salaries of Ukrainian soldiers. He specifically called on European donors to contribute to those wages as well.
And what's the Kremlin's stance on potential peace talks between Putin and Zelensky?
The Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, reiterated their position that such a summit should only happen to finalize a peace settlement after all the groundwork has been laid by experts. He also raised questions about Zelensky's legal authority to make binding agreements in the future, suggesting potential difficulties down the line.
So no summit anytime soon, it sounds like. Now, within the EU, Hungary is pushing back hard against the proposed budget, specifically the parts related to Ukraine.
Very hard. Hungary has strongly criticized the European Commission's proposed 7-year EU budget for the period 2028-2034, bluntly calling it a budget for Ukraine. They object to the significant amounts allocated for aid to Ukraine and funds earmarked for its potential future EU accession.
What are their specific objections? Is it just the cost?
It's partly the cost, but also the priorities. Hungarian officials, led by Prime Minister Viktor Orban, are concerned about funds being shifted away from things like cohesion policies, which help poorer regions catch up, and agricultural subsidies, which they see as vital for Central Europe's food security. Orban warned the budget could destroy the EU and claimed its primary aim was solely to admit Ukraine. It's worth noting Germany has also expressed reservations about parts of the plan, citing its own budget constraints.
So this isn't just Hungary. It reveals deeper divisions within the EU.
Absolutely. It highlights significant internal disagreements over the scale and direction of financial support for Ukraine, and particularly over the implications of Ukraine's potential membership. It affects the bloc's unity and strategic direction at a really critical time.
Okay, let's swing back to the U.S. political landscape and its global ripple effects. The Russiagate story just refuses to die, doesn't it? Senator Ted Cruz made a pretty extreme comparison recently.
He did. Senator Cruz controversially compared the launch of the FBI's Trump-Russia investigation back in 2016 to the 1941 Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. It was a deliberately provocative comparison, accusing the former Obama administration of, in his view, lying to the American public and fabricating the claims about Russian collusion with Trump's campaign.
That's quite a comparison. What's the basis for these continued arguments?
Proponents of this view often point to declassified documents and reports, like one highlighted by former Representative Tulsi Gabbard, which they argue expose intentional manipulation by top U.S. officials. They talk about a coup against Trump and the weaponization of intelligence.
But haven't official investigations confirmed Russian interference in the election?
Yes, multiple U.S. intelligence agencies and investigations have concluded that Russia did interfere in the 2016 election with the aim of helping Trump and hurting Hillary Clinton. However, the perspective being pushed by Cruz and others is that while interference may have occurred, the Obama administration deliberately exaggerated or manipulated the intelligence findings to specifically delegitimize Trump's victory and potentially remove him from office. They raise questions about accountability for those officials and suggest deeper systemic issues within the political establishment.
So it's less about if Russia interfered and more about how that interference was investigated and portrayed by U.S. officials.
That seems to be the core argument from that side. It remains a deeply polarizing issue, obviously, with starkly conflicting narratives about the events of 2016 and their aftermath.
And speaking of lingering controversies, Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, Trump's name came up in the Epstein files.
According to reports, yes. The U.S. Department of Justice, the DOJ, apparently found mentions of former President Trump in Jeffrey Epstein's files earlier this year. The DOJ reportedly informed Trump's team they didn't intend to release further documents containing sensitive material like child pornography or victim information, and later announced a decision to withhold additional files related to the Epstein case.
And Trump has denied any wrongdoing or close association, right? There was that lawsuit over a letter.
Correct. Trump strongly denied a Wall Street Journal report about a supposed lewd letter he allegedly sent to Epstein years ago, calling it fake news. That denial led to his filing a libel lawsuit against Rupert Murdoch, the Wall Street Journal's parent company, and related entities.
And what's happening with Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's accomplice? Is the DOJ still talking to her?
Yes. A Justice Department official was expected to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell for a second day. This comes amidst growing public pressure on the Trump administration to release more files related to Epstein's sex trafficking network. There's speculation about what these meetings entail, including the possibility that Maxwell might be seeking some kind of deal or even a presidential pardon.
And this whole situation is playing out in the political arena, too.
Oh, definitely. You had a Democratic strategist criticizing Fox News for its intense focus on the Biden family's controversies, while, in their view, downplaying the Epstein story, calling it a distraction. It shows how even this deeply disturbing case gets filtered through partisan lenses and used in political arguments.
Yeah, no escape from politics. Another clash. Trump versus the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, over building renovations.
It was described as an extraordinary moment, yeah. During a visit by President Trump to the Federal Reserve Building, he publicly confronted Chairman Powell about the cost of the building's $2.5 billion renovation.
He just asked him about the budget. right there in public.
Apparently so. Questioned Powell on the renovation costs and then, reportedly, somewhat jokingly, added pressure about lowering interest rates.
Yeah.
Trump has been publicly critical of Powell and the Fed's interest rate policies for a long time, even though he appointed Powell. He backed off earlier threats to fire him, but this public exchange highlights the ongoing tension.
It really blurs the lines around the Fed's supposed independence from political pressure, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It underscores the contentious relationship that can exist between the executive branch and the central bank, and the political pressure that presidents often try to exert on monetary policy, even if the Fed is theoretically independent.
Okay, beyond the high-profile clashes, the Trump administration has been active on a range of domestic policy fronts, too. What's this about an executive order on homelessness?
President Trump signed an executive order aimed at addressing homelessness. The specifics weren't fully detailed in the source, but the stated goal is to make it easier for cities and states to remove homeless individuals from public streets. This could signal significant policy shifts in how homelessness is handled at the federal and local levels.
And taking on sanctuary cities, the DOJ is suing New York City.
Yes, the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against New York City and its mayor, Eric Adams. The suit challenges the city's local sanctuary policies, which limit cooperation between local law enforcement and federal immigration authorities like ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
What's the DOJ's argument?
They accuse the city of obstructing federal law enforcement, claiming these policies allow potentially dangerous, undocumented immigrants who've committed crimes to be released back into the community instead of being handed over for deportation. This lawsuit is part of a broader, ongoing effort by the Trump administration to crack down on sanctuary jurisdictions, predominantly in Democrat-controlled cities.
And deportations are ramping up from that facility in Florida, Alligator Alcatraz.
That's the nickname given to a detention center in Florida, yeah. Deportation flights have reportedly begun from there. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis stated that about 100 detainees have already been transferred to other countries, and he expects those numbers to increase dramatically. He framed this as part of Florida's support for President Trump's wider immigration crackdown.
There's also action related to universities and anti-Semitism claims following the Columbia settlement.
Right. After Columbia University agreed to a massive $221 million settlement over claims of anti-Semitism on campus, the Trump administration is reportedly looking into levying fines against other universities, potentially including Harvard, on similar grounds. This ties into the administration's broader push against diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI initiatives on campuses, which they often link to anti-Semitism concerns.
And another executive order, this one targeting college sports, specifically pay-for-play.
Yes. President Trump issued an executive order focused on college athletics. The main thrust seems to be prohibiting third-party pay-for-play payments to student athletes. This is wading directly into the complex and evolving landscape of name, image, and likeness NIL rights for college athletes.
So trying to roll back the NIL era, or at least regulate it more tightly.
It seems aimed at reducing the influence of what the administration perceives as big money and external booster collectives in college sports, potentially trying to restore a more traditional model of amateurism. It's definitely sparked a lot of debate about the future of collegiate athletics and athlete compensation.
Wow, lots of policy moves happening. And just to lighten the mood slightly, the White House versus South Park.
Chuckles. Yes, a bit of political pop culture clash. The White House publicly criticized the animated show South Park for an episode that apparently featured a parody involving a naked Donald Trump. The White House statement called the show fourth rate.
Fourth rate? Ouch, how did South Park respond?
In classic South Park fashion, the creators, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, issued a mock apology. They said they were terribly sorry and sincerely hope the White House will find the time to watch our entire library of episodes. It's a humorous example of the ongoing back and forth between political figures and satirical commentary.
Gotta love a mock apology. Okay, let's broaden the view again to some wider geopolitical trends. The AUKUS Treaty, Australia, UK, US, is deepening.
Yes, the UK and Australia are set to further strengthen their ties under the AUKUS Security Pact, which also includes the United States. The stated goal is to enhance each country's ability to support shared security and defense interests.
And this is mostly focused on the Indo-Pacific region, countering China's influence.
That's widely seen as the primary driver, yes. Building on their long-standing bilateral relationships, AUKUS is focused on collaboration in advanced defense technologies, like nuclear-powered submarines for Australia, cyber capabilities, AI, and hypersonic missiles, largely viewed as a strategic alignment to address security challenges in the Indo-Pacific.
And speaking of China, the recent EU-China summit didn't go so well, deepening tensions.
That seems to be the takeaway. Reports indicate the summit failed to produce any significant breakthroughs, and instead highlighted growing friction between the European Union and China.
What were the main sticking points?
EU leaders expressed frustration over a lack of progress on key concerns. These include ongoing human rights issues in China, particularly regarding Xinjiang and Hong Kong, and market access barriers for European companies operating in China. China's trade practices, like state subsidies, also remain a point of contention.
So the partnership is strained.
It seems to be at a critical juncture, as one source put it. Both sides are navigating complex geopolitical issues, like China's stance on the Russia-Ukraine war, and their economic priorities are diverging in some areas. While they still cooperate on global issues like climate change, the overall relationship appears increasingly strained.
Okay, shifting to Africa. Egypt is offering security support to countries in the Sahel region.
That's right. Egypt's foreign minister announced that Cairo is ready to share its expertise in counterterrorism with Sahel nations, which have been battling extremist insurgencies for years. Specifically, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi pledged support to Mali, which has faced deadly jihadist violence since 2012.
What kind of support? Military aid?
The commitment includes technical, logistical, and institutional assistance aimed at helping Mali restore security and stability. Egypt is also strengthening ties with Mali in areas like education and health, and boosting trade and economic cooperation with other West African nations more broadly. It signals Egypt playing a more active diplomatic and security role in the wider region.
And a quick note on Hong Kong placing bounties on pro-democracy activists. That sounds like a serious escalation.
It is. Hong Kong authorities have placed bounties on 19 pro-democracy activists, many of whom are living in exile. This move definitely escalates tensions and reflects the government's intensifying crackdown on dissent following the imposition of the national security law.
What does this mean for those activists and for freedom in Hong Kong?
It raises significant concerns about freedom of expression and human rights. These activists now face heightened risks, even abroad, potentially facing arrest and extradition attempts. It highlights the ongoing struggle for civil liberties in Hong Kong and the shrinking space for political opposition.
Okay, let's pivot now to the world of economics, markets, and some of the big global challenges we're facing. First up, some positive news from the markets. The NASDAQ and S&P 500 hitting fresh records.
Yeah, the market's been quite buoyant recently, particularly in the tech sector. Both the NASDAQ Composite and the S&P 500 Index, that's the Standard & Poor's 500, a broad measure of the U.S. market, reached new record highs. In fact, the S&P 500 was on track for its fifth consecutive record close.
What's driving this optimism? Is it still all about AI?
AI enthusiasm is definitely a major factor. Strong earnings reports, particularly from Google's parent company, Alphabet, have helped fuel the rally. There's just a lot of broader market optimism around the potential of artificial intelligence to drive future growth.
Are specific companies standing out?
We saw notable moves in companies like Tesla, IBM International Business Machines Corporation, and the healthcare giant United Health. Interestingly, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which is more focused on traditional industrial companies, actually saw a bit of a decline. So it's not uniform across the board, but tech is clearly leading the charge.
So influenced by tech earnings, AI hype, and presumably ongoing trade discussions.
Exactly. Corporate earnings season and any news related to international trade negotiations are always key factors influencing market sentiment right now.
But it's not all good news economically. We heard earlier about the EU's ban on Russian diesel driving up prices. And now, Volkswagen's profits are apparently tumbling because of U.S. tariffs.
Yes, this highlights the direct impact of trade policy on major global corporations. The German automaker Volkswagen has reported a significant drop in profits, attributing it directly to the effects of U.S. tariffs imposed under the Trump administration.
So trade wars have real consequences for big companies' bottom lines.
Absolutely. It underscores the significant economic ramifications of these international trade disputes. The automotive sector is particularly vulnerable because it relies on complex global supply chains that can be easily disrupted by tariffs and counter-tariffs. It's a clear example of how political decisions on trade can hit major industries hard.
Okay, another big business story. The Paramount-Skydance merger got approved by the FCC. That's a major consolidation in media.
It is. The Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, has given the green light to the multi-billion-dollar merger between Paramount Global and Skydance Media. This marks a pretty significant shakeup in the entertainment landscape.
What kind of changes are expected from this merger, besides just becoming a bigger company?
Well, the idea is to combine Skydance's creative content expertise, particularly in film production, with Paramount's vast library, production capabilities, and distribution networks, like the CBS television network and the Paramount Plus streaming service. Some specific changes mentioned alongside the approval include the potential creation of a CBS News ombudsman position, which is interesting.
An ombudsman, like an internal watchdog for news standards.
Potentially, yeah. And also, reports mention the elimination of diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI initiatives at Paramount as part of the post-merger integration. That's likely to be controversial.
Definitely. And leadership changes, too.
Yes, Paramount co-CEO Chris McCarthy is expected to depart once the acquisition by Skydance is complete. It signals a clear shift in leadership and strategy for the combined media entity moving forward.
Lots of moving parts in the media world. Now, back to energy markets. The EU's ban on Russian diesel. We know it's pushing prices up. How bad is it, and is it likely to last?
The impact seems significant. The latest EU sanctions effectively cut off imports of refined oil products, like diesel, that are made using Russian crude oil, even if they're refined elsewhere. This has caused a reported surge in diesel prices globally.
And the CEO of Total Energies thinks this isn't just a temporary blip.
Patrick Pouyanné, the CEO of the French energy major Total Energies, warned that these higher costs are likely to persist. Traders are now forced to scramble for alternative suppliers for diesel, which tightens the market. The sanctions also target companies and ships allegedly involved in transporting Russian oil using a so-called shadow fleet to circumvent earlier restrictions.
But isn't Europe still quite dependent on diesel, even if not directly from Russia?
That's the core problem. Despite efforts to diversify, the EU remains structurally short of diesel, meaning it consumes more than it produces, and Russia has historically been a key supplier. Economists are cautioning that these sanctions, while politically motivated, could have negative repercussions for the EU economy, given how crucial diesel is for transportation, industry, and agriculture. Russia, of course, slams the sanctions as illegal and detrimental.
So a policy aimed at hurting Russia economically also creates vulnerabilities for the EU itself. Complex stuff. On a slightly more positive energy note, Kazakhstan's oil exports are flowing again.
Yes, there was a temporary halt to Kazakhstan's oil exports that go through Black Sea ports, but they have now resumed. While temporary, this disruption was notable because Kazakhstan's exports via this route account for roughly 2% of the entire global oil supply.
2% might not sound huge, but in a tight market.
Exactly. It highlights the fragility of global energy supply chains. Even relatively short disruptions in one key export route can have noticeable ripple effects on international oil markets and prices. It's a reminder of how interconnected and sometimes precarious the global energy flow is.
Definitely. Now, something less about global flows and more about domestic issues. Germany's cum-ex tax fraud scheme is apparently still going on. How is that even possible?
It's quite shocking, isn't it? This scheme, known as cum-ex, has been described as Germany's biggest ever tax fraud, costing taxpayers billions of euros. And reports suggest it continues unabated, raising serious questions about regulatory effectiveness.
Remind me how cum-ex works. It's incredibly complicated, right?
Extremely complicated. In essence, it involves banks and investors rapidly trading shares with, come and without ex-dividend rights around the date a company pays out dividends. Through complex transactions and exploiting legal loopholes, they managed to make it appear as if multiple parties owned the same shares, allowing them to claim multiple refunds for capital gains tax that was often only paid once, or sometimes not at all.
So basically tricking the tax authorities into giving out refunds they weren't owed.
That's the core of it. It's a highly sophisticated form of financial misconduct. Despite numerous investigations, raids, arrests, and legislative changes aimed at closing the loopholes, the scheme seems to have adapted and continued operating, perhaps in modified forms.
Why is it so hard to stop?
The sheer complexity, the cross-border nature of the transactions involving multiple players, and perhaps the difficulty in prosecuting cases successfully. It really underscores the formidable challenges regulators face in combating intricate financial fraud and the constant need for vigilance and stronger oversight mechanisms in the financial sector.
A frustrating example of financial loopholes persisting. Okay, shifting to a major infrastructure project. India's new railway link in Kashmir. This sounds like a big deal.
It's a landmark project, yes. India has inaugurated the Katra-Srinagar section of the Vande Express rail line. This effectively connects the Kashmir Valley seamlessly to the rest of India's vast railway network. The journey time is dramatically reduced down to about 13 hours from what used to be a 2-day trip involving road and rail travel.
And it includes that incredibly high bridge.
It does. The project, costing around $5.5 billion, features the Chenab Bridge, which holds the title of the world's tallest railway bridge. It's a significant feat of engineering, especially given the difficult mountainous terrain.
What's the broader significance, economics?
Both. Prime Minister Narendra Modi hailed it as a symbol of India's strength. Economically, the goal is to boost tourism, trade, and overall socioeconomic development in the Kashmir region by improving connectivity. Locals are hopeful it will provide better access to markets and create new job opportunities. Strategically, the line is built to be operational year-round, even in winter, and it's expected to facilitate the movement of troops and military equipment in the strategically sensitive region.
So, development and defense implications. Interesting. Now let's talk currency. The Russian ruble's share in foreign trade settlements is growing.
Yes, this is quite significant. For the first time this year, the share of the Russian ruble used in settling payments for Russian exports has reportedly surpassed 50%. This marks a major milestone in Russia's ongoing efforts to de-dollarize its economy.
De-dollarize, meaning reducing reliance on the U.S. dollar. Why?
Primarily as a response to Western sanctions imposed following the invasion of Ukraine. These sanctions restricted Russia's access to the dollar-dominated global financial system. So, Moscow has been actively encouraging trade partners, especially friendly countries, to settle transactions in rubles or other non-Western currencies.
Is it working? Are other countries ditching the dollar for the ruble?
The data suggests a shift. There's apparently been a decline in the use of currencies from other friendly countries, like the Chinese yuan, in favor of the ruble for settling Russian trade. The motivation seems to be avoiding currency conversion costs and risks associated with using currencies that could also be subject to Western financial pressure.
So it's about building a more insulated financial system.
Exactly. The growing dominance of the ruble in its own trade settlements, especially with neighboring countries and key partners like China and India, reflects Moscow's determined push to reduce its vulnerability to the Western financial system and carve out a larger role for its own currency in international trade, responding directly to global financial restrictions.
Fascinating economic shifts driven by geopolitics. Okay, a couple of quick UK retail updates. River Island is closing stores.
Yes, the UK fashion retailer River Island is reportedly planning to close 33 of its shops. The company's future seems uncertain as it awaits a crucial court ruling on a proposed restructuring plan. It reflects the ongoing challenges facing many brick-and-mortar retailers on the UK high street.
But some good news for UK retail. Hot weather helped sales.
Apparently so. Hot weather in June gave a significant boost to retail sales in the UK. The Office for National Statistics reported increased sales at supermarkets, particularly for drinks, obviously. Fuel sales were also up as people presumably ventured out more to enjoy the sunshine. It's a good reminder of how something as simple as the weather can directly impact consumer spending patterns and give the economy a temporary lift.
Always nice when the weather cooperates. Okay, now for a story that sounds like a personal finance nightmare. An $82,000 tax debt.
Yeah, this was a rather shocking call featured on The Ramsey Show, a popular personal finance program. A nurse from Montana shared her story. Her husband apparently hadn't paid taxes for years, accumulating a debt of $82,000, and the IRS was now planning to seize their home.
$82,000? How does that even happen?
According to the caller, her husband had left his job to pursue real estate full-time and had simply not paid the taxes owed. She said he had secretly spent the money allocated for taxes. Even though she had decided to divorce him over this financial betrayal, she still felt an obligation or desire to try and bail him out.
Wow. The hosts must have been stunned.
They expressed shock and considerable frustration. Yeah. It's a really stark illustration of the devastating real-world consequences of financial mismanagement, secrecy within a relationship, and the kind of personal economic crises that can unfold behind closed doors.
All right, let's move into our next section, focusing on the environment, recent disasters, and broader societal well-being. Starting with a truly remarkable, if sobering, story. Australia's climate migration visa for people from Tuvalu.
This is a landmark initiative, really. Tuvalu, as you know, is a low-lying Pacific island nation incredibly vulnerable to sea level rise caused by climate change. Parts of the country are literally disappearing under the waves.
A direct consequence of climate change, essentially erasing a nation.
Tragically, yes. And in response, Australia has launched this groundbreaking new visa program specifically designed to allow citizens of Tuvalu to relocate to Australia. It's being called the world's first official climate migration program.
The first official one. How many people are taking this up?
The demand highlights the urgency. Over 5,000 Tuvalanians have reportedly already applied for this visa. It sets a hugely significant global precedent. How will nations respond as climate change makes more places uninhabitable? Tuvalu is on the front lines, but they won't be the last. This Australian program could become a model, or at least spark debate, about climate refugees and international responsibility.
A glimpse into a future we might see more of. Okay, another environmental worry. Forever chemical acid rain. What is trifluoroacetic acid, or TFA?
TFA, trifluoroacetic acid, is getting attention because it's incredibly persistent in the environment. It resists natural degradation processes, which is why it's earned the nickname forever chemical, similar to PFAS chemicals you might have heard about.
Okay, so it sticks around. Where does it come from, and why is it a problem now?
It's believed to be formed primarily from the atmospheric breakdown of certain hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, and hydrofluorofins, HFOs, which are used as refrigerants and in other industrial applications. Ironically, some were introduced as replacements for ozone-depleting substances. The concern is that TFA is now being found widely in rainwater, surface water, drinking water, even in human blood.
So it's getting into the water cycle and into us. Are there health risks?
That's the big question mark. Its widespread presence raises significant concerns about environmental pollution and potential long-term human health risks, though the exact impacts are still being studied. Because it's so persistent, cleaning it up is extremely difficult.
So we've created a new kind of persistent pollutant that falls with the rain.
Essentially, yes. Scientists and environmental groups are calling for much better monitoring and stricter regulations on the chemicals that break down into TFA, trying to mitigate its impact and prevent further contamination. It's a complex challenge because these chemicals are used globally. It's like a brand new form of acid rain, but one that doesn't easily go away.
Worrying stuff. Let's shift to land degradation. New research showing significant problems in northeast Brazil.
Yes, researchers from UCLA, the University of California, Los Angeles, used satellite data to analyze land transformation in northeastern Brazil between 2000 and 2020, and the findings are described as worrying.
What did they find specifically?
They looked at several biomes. The Caatinga biome, which is a unique semi-arid region, lost substantial amounts of forest and grassland, mostly due to the expansion of farming activities. They also saw deforestation pressures in parts of the Amazon rainforest near protected areas, and the Cerrado savanna region also faced significant conversion to agriculture.
The Caatinga, isn't that considered a climate risk hotspot?
It is. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, has identified the Caatinga as particularly vulnerable to climate change impacts. So this degradation, driven largely by agriculture, is compounding the climate risks. The research really emphasizes the urgent need for accurate, up-to-date land use data, targeted monitoring, and local investments to support better environmental planning and conservation efforts in these critical Brazilian biomes.
Land use change interacting with climate change. A dangerous combination. Speaking of climate change impacts, are sinkholes becoming more common because of it?
There's growing evidence suggesting a link, yes. The occurrence of sinkholes seems to be becoming more likely in some areas due to factors related to global warming and climate change.
How does that work? What's the connection?
One major mechanism involves groundwater levels. Droughts, which are becoming more frequent and severe in some regions due to climate change, can cause groundwater levels to drop significantly. When rainfall does occur, it might not be enough to replenish these underground water sources adequately.
And lower groundwater makes sinkholes more likely.
Yes. In areas with underlying soluble rock like limestone, which is common in places like Florida, for example, groundwater normally helps support the overlying soil and rock. When the water level drops, the support is weakened or removed, making the ground above more prone to sudden collapse, creating a sinkhole. So climate change, through altered rainfall patterns and drought, can exacerbate the natural geological conditions that lead to sinkhole formation.
Another unexpected consequence of a warming planet. Okay, let's turn to some recent disasters and accidents. A deadly tropical storm hit the Philippines.
Yes, tragically. The storm, named Typhoon Komay locally, caused significant devastation in the Philippines earlier this week. At least 25 deaths have been reported, and around 278,000 people had to be evacuated from their homes.
That's a huge number of people displaced. How bad was the storm?
It made landfall with strong winds around 100 kilometers per hour, or 62 miles per hour, triggering widespread flooding and landslides in several villages. Although it was reportedly weakening as it moved through, its impact highlights the continued vulnerability of the Philippines to these powerful tropical cyclones.
And another tragic incident, this time in India, a school roof collapse.
Yes, a terrible event in Rajasthan, India. At least 4 children were killed and 17 others were injured when the roof of their school building collapsed shortly after daily prayers.
Oh, that's awful. What caused the collapse?
The school was a government-run building in the Barmer district, and there were about 25 to 30 students inside at the time. Local authorities suspect the building's structure was likely deteriorating, and recent heavy rainfall in the area probably exacerbated the weakness, leading to the collapse. Rescue efforts were ongoing to find any other survivors. It raises serious questions about infrastructure safety, especially in public school buildings.
Absolutely heartbreaking.
And a fatal gas explosion in Russia. Yes, in the city of Saratov, Russia, a powerful gas explosion occurred in a residential apartment block, killing at least 3 people.
How bad was the damage?
It was extensive. The explosion caused several floors of the building to collapse entirely. Rescue crews were searching through the rubble for survivors. Media footage showed widespread damage, with debris scattered across the streets, and nearby buildings were also affected. Emergency services were working to secure the site and provide temporary shelter for those displaced.
Just devastating for those residents. And another tragedy in Russia, a plane crash in the Far East.
Yes, another very sad incident. A plane crash in Russia's Far East region resulted in the deaths of all 48 people on board, including 5 children.
All 48 people. Do they know what caused it?
State media reported widespread shock and sadness over the event. Investigators are actively looking into the cause, and one possibility being explored is potential crew error. But the investigation is ongoing to determine the exact circumstances of the crash.
All right, let's move into our final section, looking at various aspects of society, health, and justice. Starting in the UK, with the ongoing doctors' strikes and the disruption to the National Health Service, the NHS.
Yes, this is a major issue causing significant strain. Resident doctors in England are currently in the midst of a 5-day strike over pay and conditions. This is creating what health officials call a challenging few days for the NHS.
How disruptive is it? Are hospitals grinding to a halt?
They're trying desperately to keep essential services running, particularly emergency care. But hospitals have been advised they may need to postpone non-urgent procedures and appointments in exceptional circumstances. It's a real struggle to balance emergency work with routine care during the strike.
How are patients reacting? It must be incredibly frustrating if your surgery gets canceled.
There's definitely patient anger and frustration being reported, yeah. People feeling utterly lost due to delays. But interestingly, many reports also note considerable public sympathy for the resident doctors, acknowledging the pressures they're under.
And the political reaction.
The government, represented by Health Secretary Steve Barclay, has expressed deep regret over the disruption. The opposition leader, Sir Keir Starmer, pleaded with the doctors' union not to continue down what he called a damaging road of strike action. The media narrative is heavily focused on the threat to NHS from strikes, highlighting the pressure on the healthcare system.
A difficult situation with no easy answers. Moving to a global health perspective. The World Health Organization declaring loneliness a global health threat. That sounds serious.
It is being framed very seriously, yes. The WHO released a report highlighting loneliness and social isolation not just as personal issues, but as a global health threat, and, significantly, a political failure.
A political failure. Why?
The report emphasizes that chronic loneliness and social disconnection aren't just sad. They can have severe physical health consequences, increasing the risk of things like heart disease, stroke, dementia, anxiety, depression, and can even lead to premature death. The risk is comparable to smoking or obesity, apparently.
Wow. So feeling disconnected is literally bad for your health.
That's the message. The WHO is urging governments to treat social connection as a public health priority. They're calling for national policies, more research into interventions, better ways to measure loneliness across populations, and greater engagement from communities and individuals to foster connection. They argue it's vital not just for individual well-being, but also for economic prosperity and overall societal resilience.
So we need policies to combat loneliness, just like we have policies for public health issues like smoking.
That's the push, to recognize that meaningful human connection is a fundamental pillar of health and society and requires deliberate attention and resources.
Okay, another health-related item, this one from the White House. Seeking a redesign of gas cans. Why gas cans?
It sounds mundane, but apparently it's addressing years of user frustration with modern safety gas cans, which many people find difficult and messy to use due to regulations aimed at preventing spills and vapor emissions.
Ah, those annoying spouts that never seem to work right.
Exactly. But beyond user convenience, there's a genuine environmental and health angle. Scientists have pointed out that traditional gas cans, through spills and escaping vapors, are a significant source of air pollution, releasing volatile organic compounds, VOCs, that contribute to smog and can be harmful to health.
So the redesign is about making them easier to use and better for the environment and our health.
That seems to be the goal. To find a design that meets safety and emission standards but is also more user-friendly, reducing frustration while also mitigating the environmental and health impacts of gasoline vapors.
Makes sense. Now, something specific for allergy sufferers in the UK. Cash cards for people with gluten allergies.
Yes, this is a pilot program being tested. The idea is to provide people diagnosed with celiac disease or other medically recognized gluten allergies with prepaid cash cards, specifically to help them purchase gluten-free foods, which are often significantly more expensive than regular versions.
That sounds helpful. Is it enough, though?
Well, feedback from at least one person who participated in the pilot program suggests it might not be. She noted that the financial assistance provided only scratches the surface of the extra cost involved in maintaining a strict gluten-free diet. It highlights the significant financial burden that dietary restrictions can impose on individuals and families.
A step in the right direction, perhaps, but maybe not a complete solution. Okay, a note about an important international day. The International Day of Women and Girls of African Descent.
Yes, July 25th marked the first official observance of this day by the United Nations. The day aims to recognize and celebrate the immense contributions that women and girls of African descent make to societies worldwide.
And it's not just about celebration, right? It's also about highlighting challenges.
Absolutely. The day also serves to draw attention to the ongoing, often intersecting challenges they face due to racism and sexism. It emphasizes the urgent need to address racial, gender, and socioeconomic discrimination that disproportionately affects them. Organizations like the UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, use the occasion to advocate for stronger maternal health systems and greater investment in the leadership potential of women and girls of African descent.
Important recognition and call to action. Now, shifting to justice and human rights issues.
Right.
A high-profile verdict in Canada, the ice hockey sexual assault case.
Yes, a case that garnered a huge amount of media attention and public discussion in Canada has concluded. 5 former members of Canada's World Junior Ice Hockey team, accused of a group sexual assault dating back to 2018, were found not guilty on all charges.
Not guilty. That must have started a lot of reaction, given how closely the case was followed.
Immensely so. The verdict brings legal closure to a very long and controversial process. But it has definitely reignited intense debates across Canada about issues of consent, accountability in sports culture, the handling of sexual assault cases within the justice system, and the credibility of complainants versus defendants.
A complex and sensitive outcome. Now for something almost unbelievable. Indian police busted a fake embassy scam.
This story is wild. Police in Ghaziabad, a city near New Delhi in India, arrested a 45-year-old man named Harshvardhan Jain who was pretending to be the ambassador for several non-existent countries.
Non-existent countries, like where?
Places he apparently made up or claimed legitimacy for, like the United Territories of the Sovereign Arctic Nation of West Arctica, the Principality of Saborga, the Federated States of Pulvia, and the Kingdom of Ladonia.
Wow. How did he pull this off?
He allegedly ran this sophisticated scam for 7 years out of a rented house. He had fake flags, fake diplomatic license plates on his car, fabricated documents, and claimed connections to international bodies. He apparently targeted businessmen, promising them access to global markets or investment opportunities through his fake diplomatic status, and was allegedly involved in money laundering through shell companies.
The sheer audacity, pretending to be an ambassador for countries that don't exist for 7 years.
Quite something, isn't it? A truly elaborate deception.
Indeed. Okay, Back to international justice. The ICC jailing a former African football chief for war crimes. We touched on this earlier.
Yes, Patrice Edouard Nguesona, who was once the head of the Central African Republic's Football Federation, along with Alfred Yekatom, a rebel commander known as Rambo, were found guilty by the International Criminal Court, ICC, of war crimes and crimes against humanity.
What were they convicted of doing?
They were leaders of the mainly Christian anti-Balaka militia, which carried out brutal attacks against Muslim civilians in the Central African Republic between 2013 and 2014. The charges included murder, torture, persecution, attacking civilians, and pillaging. Nguesona received a 12-year sentence, Yekatom 15 years.
It shows that even figures from the sports world aren't immune from accountability for atrocities.
Exactly. It highlights the horrific violence that has plagued the Kira and demonstrates the ICC's efforts to hold high-ranking individuals accountable for severe human rights abuses, regardless of their background.
And another release catching attention. France freeing a pro-Palestinian convict after decades.
Yes, Georges Abdallah, a Lebanese militant recognized as a pro-Palestinian activist, has been released from French prison after serving 41 years. He was immediately deported to Lebanon upon release.
41 years? That's an incredibly long time. Why was he imprisoned?
He was convicted in the 1980s for complicity in the murders of an American military attaché and an Israeli diplomat in Paris. His imprisonment was highly politicized, with ongoing campaigns for his release over the decades, framing him as a political prisoner fighting for Palestinian liberation. His release, after such a long period and given the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, has understandably garnered significant international attention.
And finally, under justice and human rights, these harrowing accounts from Venezuelans detained in El Salvador's mega prison.
Yes. Reports have emerged from 4 Venezuelan men who were deported from the United States and ended up incarcerated in El Salvador's huge, controversial CECOT mega prison built under President Nayib Bukele's crackdown on gangs. After being released and deported again, they described their time there as hell, alleging severe mistreatment and inhumane conditions.
What kind of conditions?
Details weren't fully specified in the source, but their accounts add to existing concerns raised by human rights organizations about overcrowding, lack of due process, alleged torture, and harsh conditions within El Salvador's prison system during the state of emergency targeting gangs. It raises serious questions about deportation policies that send people to countries where they may face such treatment.
And one last item related to conflict impact. Sudan's main water testing lab destroyed.
Yes, as we touched on earlier, this is a critical blow in war-torn Sudan. The Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, reportedly destroyed the main water quality testing laboratory for Khartoum state. This damages essential infrastructure and disrupts the functioning of all water treatment stations in the state, directly impacting access to safe drinking water for potentially millions of people.
And the cultural loss, too, the museum looting.
Also devastating. The RSF's alleged looting of archaeological gold artifacts from the National Museum in Khartoum is being called a historical catastrophe. A significant portion of the country's ancient heritage may have been lost or destroyed. It's a stark reminder of how conflict ravages not just lives and infrastructure, but also irreplaceable cultural history.
Okay, let's wrap things up with a slightly lighter section, though still with some interesting notes. Sports and culture. Starting with cricket, some history being made. Joe Root climbing the all-time run scorer list.
Absolutely. England's Joe Root has been in phenomenal form. During the recent Test series against India, he first surpassed South Africa's Jacques Kallis and India's Rahul Dravid to become the 3rd highest run scorer in Test cricket history.
Wow, 3rd highest ever. That's legendary territory.
And he didn't stop there. In the very next Test match, he went on to overtake Australia's Ricky Ponting, moving into 2nd place on the all-time list, behind only India's Sachin Tendulkar. It's being hailed as an incredible achievement, one of the finest careers in modern cricket.
Amazing consistency. And his captain, Ben Stokes, also had a good series.
Ben Stokes also put in a commanding performance, particularly with the ball in one of the tests, taking a 5-wicket haul. It showcased his all-round capabilities and leadership, helping England compete strongly against a very tough Indian side.
Great individual performances. Shifting to football, the Women's Africa Cup of Nations final, Nigeria versus Morocco.
Yes, a huge match for women's football on the continent. Nigeria, the dominant force historically with 9 titles already, were aiming for their 10th championship. They faced the host nation, Morocco, in the final in Rabat, Morocco were seeking their very first WAFCON title.
So a clash between the established giants and the rising hosts.
Exactly. It represents a really significant moment for the growth and visibility of women's football in Africa. There was also a significant prize money increase, with the winner sharing $1 million. It highlights the growing investment and interest in the women's game across the continent.
Fantastic to see. Now, some sad news from the world of professional wrestling. The passing of Hulk Hogan.
Yes, very sad news for wrestling fans. Terry Bollea, known worldwide as Hulk Hogan, passed away at the age of 71 after suffering a cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
He was just an absolutely pivotal figure, especially in the 1980s Hulkamania era that brought wrestling into the mainstream. He had a massive impact on the industry and even crossed over into movies and broader pop culture.
A true icon of that era. I imagine the tributes poured in.
Oh, absolutely. The news sent shockwaves through the wrestling community and beyond. Figures like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson shared personal memories, calling Hogan his childhood hero. It really underscores the immense influence and enduring legacy Hogan had on entertainment.
A huge loss for that world. Okay, circling back briefly to President Trump's executive order on college sports. We touched on it earlier.
Right. The order focused on prohibiting third-party pay-for-play payments to college athletes.
So directly addressing the NIL name, image, and likeness situation.
It seems aimed squarely at the current NIL landscape, particularly the role of booster collectives and external entities making payments to athletes, which some argue has turned college sports into a quasi-professional system. The order reflects an attempt to curb what the administration sees as excessive big money influence, and perhaps steer things back towards a more traditional model of amateurism, though the legality and enforceability of such an order are likely to be debated and challenged. It taps into that ongoing national argument about the future of college athletes and compensation.
A complex issue with no easy answers there either. How about technology in sports? VAR in football, is it here to stay, or should its powers be expanded?
The debate continues. Mark Bullingham, the chief executive of the English Football Association, FA, recently stated that in his view there's no need to extend VAR powers. VAR, of course, is the video assistant referee system used to review key decisions.
Why not extend its powers? What's the concern?
Bullingham's point was that VAR already interrupts the game enough as it is. His comments reflect the ongoing controversy surrounding VAR. While it aims for accuracy, many fans and pundits feel it disrupts the flow of the game, leads to lengthy delays, and sometimes creates as much controversy as it solves. It's that constant balancing act between technological assistance for officials and maintaining the pace and spirit of the sport.
Finding that sweet spot is tricky. Finally, women's cycling. The Tour de France Femme, is it considered on par with the men's event yet?
That's the question being actively discussed and evaluated right now. The Tour de France Femme, the women's version of the famous race, is under scrutiny to determine if it truly stands on par with the men's event in terms of prestige, resources, coverage, and difficulty.
What are the key aspects of that discussion?
It's sparking important conversations about gender equality and representation within professional cycling. Are the race routes challenging enough? Is the prize money comparable? Is the media coverage equitable? Are female athletes getting the same level of support and opportunity? The event itself is a focal point for these broader discussions about achieving genuine gender inclusivity and fair representation across all levels of sport. Hashtag outro.
Wow. Okay. We have covered a lot of ground today. Seriously. From trying to grasp a potential hidden layer of reality and thinking about conscious mini-brains, all the way to the heartbreaking humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the complex moves on the geopolitical chessboard in Europe, the Middle East, Asia.
And we saw AI popping up everywhere, didn't we? From helping you shop at Walmart with super agents to, well, those German spy cockroaches. We looked at economic pressures from sanctions, tariffs, the push for domestic chip production, even how the weather impacts retail sales.
It really drives home how interconnected everything is. Science, tech, politics, economics, human stories, they're all tangled together. Our goal here, as always, is to try and untangle some of those threads for you, our listener, to cut through the noise and offer some clarity and context.
Yeah, turning that overwhelming flood of news into something you can actually process. Maybe even gain a genuinely informed perspective on. Understanding these links, seeing how one thing impacts another, hopefully helps all of us navigate this incredibly fast-moving world a little better.
We really hope you walk away from this deep dive feeling not just like you've heard a lot of facts, but that you have a richer understanding of the forces shaping our world today.
Seeing those connections, That's key. How a scientific discovery can raise ethical questions that ripple through society. How a political decision can have immediate economic consequences globally. How technology is changing everything from relationships to warfare.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. As we keep pushing these technological boundaries, creating AI companions, developing autonomous systems for conflict, using modern tools to deal with age-old disputes, what is that core human element we need to be careful not to lose? Amidst all this change, all this information, how do we safeguard what truly makes us human?
That's a deep one to ponder. Definitely something to mull over.
Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us on this extensive exploration today.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time.
Keep digging deep.